To my right, we have Dan Drogman, Chief Executive Officer of Smart Spaces, Tripty Arya, Founder and Chief Executive Officer of Travtus, Benjamin Lesser, Development Manager of Derwent London, and Kieran Hodgson, Director Planning Iceni. Thank you all very much for joining me today. I'm going to do something that no chair should ever fairly do to their panel, which is ask a question I've not told them I'm going to ask, and I've only just thought of. But I was just looking at the banner over there, and there's a ready-made question, which is that last line, rise of the machines, question mark. And I promise we'll get back into where we're going and what we discussed in a minute. But I just think it would be really interesting to kick things off if each of you could just very briefly sort of tell me what you think about that statement. Because rise of the machines, it has a connotation in some way of being quite scary, and I think that that is potentially something that the industry is struggling with, but it also has a connotation of being very futuristic and exciting, and I just wondered what you thought. So I'm really sorry, you are sitting next to me, Dan, so I'm going to start with you.
Okay, so do I need to push the button here? I don't, do I? So, yeah, I'd say my first experience of Rise of the Machines is probably our robot receptionist we've put into Hyde Park Hayes for Columbia Threadneedle. So, yeah, that's what first comes to mind when you think of that. So, essentially, that's using AI to handle a lot of the queries when the reception team are not there.
Tripty?
Yeah, you start every panel by throwing something.
Yeah, that's revealing my secrets, yes.
I think the rise of the machine as a statement is accurate. I also think you're accurate when you say that it brings up thoughts which are scary. And we probably require Hollywood to stop making films that do that so that our psyche isn't set up that way. But rise of the machines is absolutely right. We are in I think our generation will definitely see it, and it'll be part of how we live. It's a matter of how we engage with it and how we replace fear from actually assuming that this is life. But there's no avoiding it unless we avoid innovation.
Thank you very much. Benjamin.
Hi there. I'm excited by it, to be honest. I mean, I know obviously there's fear in terms of just the whole concept of the rise of the machines. You think back to all sorts of films being made. But as long as we go forward on the premise that actually the machines, we invent and develop and innovate machine technology to help us as human beings, as long as we can guard against not inventing machines that actually take away the enjoyment of what we do, how we live, how we work, how we play, and that have machines that actually enhance our experience of living, then I think it is an exciting future.
Thank you very much. Finally, Kieran.
Morning, Emily. Morning, everyone. Well, it reminds me of two of my favourite films, actually, Terminator 1 and Terminator 2, Judgment Day.
Don't say that.
The whole thing's entirely terrifying in many respects, but also really exciting as well. I think the challenge for the real estate industry is how we get there in a good way without the death and destruction. And there's some really hard work to do, actually, before we can manage that level of integration.
Can I just change the visual here a little bit? Can we, instead of thinking Terminator, think Indiana Jones? The reason why I say that is I think it's kind of important. Everyone just freaks out when you say artificial intelligence in Terminator because, it doesn't end the way you want it to. But it ends exactly how you want it to. But theoretically, artificial intelligence is the pursuit of the Holy Grail. It's closer to Indiana Jones than it is to Terminator, and we all love Indiana Jones. So we really need to start associating AI more to Indiana Jones and less to the Terminator.
Well, that's already the headline for the whole panel. Indiana Jones, not Terminator. So now that I've successfully put the panel on the spot, which as Tripty says I do often, let's just go back through the panel. And Kieran, let's start with you. It would be good to get a bit of a sense as to what each of you do in detail and what it is that AI means to you in your role, and then we can sort of delve into the subject matter a bit. But thank you very much for that introduction. I think we can all agree that Hollywood is to blame. So, Kieran.
Absolutely. So, yes, good morning. So I'm an urban planner. I head up the London planning team at Iceni project. So my day-to-day work is very much based on real estate and getting planning permission for people. So what's good about that is it allows considerations to do with AI and future technologies to be thought of from the very, very beginning of the process, so effectively from the ground up. And I think one of the challenges facing the planning system is what we do about getting there, and it starts for me with the data challenge. So Anyone who's ever been involved in planning and development, anyone who's ever submitted a planning application, knows about the huge amounts of data which are required, and all the forms you have to fill in, the design and access statements, the technical reports, all of that information which is just getting more arduous and longer each and every year. We love in the planning system to submit everything under the planning portal. We are thrilled about the 5 megabyte gig PDF as the principal document we submit. And of course the huge challenge that presents for all of us, particularly us as urban planners, is it's impossible to translate that data into a form which AI can understand. So at the moment, I think the largest planning challenge is that there's lots and lots of data, huge amounts of data. Indeed, nearly all of it's been either completely lost or not utilised as effectively as it needs to be, because the system's designed and set to some extent by government to try and harvest this information cannot and will not speak to AI and that sort of technology at all. So mechanisms are in place to change that. The GLA have spent £300 million quite recently on bringing out a data fund and have a new data standard. But I think echoing some of Andrew's comments in his speech earlier on, the real estate business and certainly us planners are quite a traditional bunch. So there's a natural reaction to see a requirement for a data standard as just an additional form to fill in, as something else to do as part of the planning system for what many of our clients see as no short or medium-term benefit, which will only come once many people have been filling it out for a series of years, and there becomes a core of data which can then begin to be usefully utilised. And I think once we're at that stage, that then becomes the tipping point from an urban planning point of view, and all the benefits which having that level of data on board can yield is incredibly exciting. I think we've got a huge amount of work to get there, though.
Okay, thank you very much. Benjamin.
Hi, good morning. So I'm a development manager and associate at Derwent London. Derwent London is, I'm sure you know, we're a real estate investment trust focused purely on central London, which means we have a long-term interest in property. We own and operate 5.6 million square foot in central London, and that means we have a long-term interest in all of that property and its value. But more importantly, we have long-term relationships with our customers, the occupiers of that space. And in that way, in terms of looking ahead and developing our future pipeline, the whole digital and smart building world is of absolute interest to us. You know, we're known, we have a reputation for delivering design-led architectural contemporary workspace, and in many instances, delivering progressive buildings, White Collar Factory being a good example. And we are currently trying to get our heads around exactly what it means to deliver a truly smart, digitally enabled building for the next phase of developments.
Thank you very much. Tripty.
I'm the CEO of a company called Traftus. Our history primarily is as a construction company and a real estate development company. In order to scale, we decided to stop doing that and only focus on R&D in real estate, primarily operations. So the company currently is building an AI property manager called Adam. Work in progress. We're hoping to manage our first building or portfolio by about March 2021.
Thank you very much. And Dan.
Hi, so Smart Spaces develops a smart building platform which aggregates all the base build systems of a building, so your access control, your lighting control, your climate control and energy management, and that surfaces that in an iPhone app, Android app, and interestingly enough, and that's the main reason for developing this was for personalisation, but now more importantly we're starting to develop a lot of optimisation strategies for energy. But because we have the end user who's personalising their environment from the app, they can endorse the optimisation strategies. So we're not got a black box in the background optimising the building, getting a lot of complaints. We're getting the buy-in up front. But more interested in that from an AI standpoint is actually once we achieve this and we develop this single API for all the base build systems and we're aggregating this data into our database, we've more recently come to understand that AI is going to be the key to unlock insights within that data set. So we're already looking to train models so we can find patterns, and whether that's around equipment, but more interestingly, the energy footprint, whether running a building at 21 Celsius throughout the year, can we see patterns when actually there's opportunities to save more energy and actually get the users to adopt our strategy?
Thank you very much. I think that one of the ironic things about AI and potentially technology more widely is that there are so many examples, and we've just seen that along this panel, of how it is not only helpful but crucial, and yet I think that that is one of the reasons that people also find it so difficult to get their head around, is that it's so vast. And so in terms of exactly what AI is and what it does, that's a very, very big question. But I just wanted to ask the panel whether the sector actually needs to understand the inner workings, or whether it is much more about understanding and appreciating what the impact can be of utilising AI effectively. I'm going to come to you, Tripty, on this first, actually. Sorry, that was a grimace. Was that a grimace?
No, that's fine. So what is AI?
And is it important to really understand the inner workings, or is it more about understanding what it can do?
So I guess first to the first question, what's artificial intelligence? Today where we stand, there is no such thing. What we're talking about is machine learning. And there's a difference between, the issue is that AI encompasses too many cool things. And everybody wants to be talking about AI as if they know what they're talking about. It's not robots, it's not drones, it's what powers all of the cool things. And that's primarily machine learning. Software or algorithms are rule-based or process-based, and that is not machine learning. So it's firstly very important to know the difference between those two things, because otherwise you're just talking about software half of the time, and mobile app is not AI. If you're pressing a button on your mobile app, even if it looks like a chat, that's not AI. That's not machine learning. So I actually refuse to use the word AI because it's easier to just say machine learning so people know exactly what you're talking about. Does the industry need to understand what it is? I think the industry needs to understand what it does itself. Forget technology or machine learning. Most companies don't understand what they do in real estate. If you're a private equity fund, the people who are fund managers have no idea how those buildings are operated. If you're an operator, you have no idea how that building is transacted. So in order to look at how you can even apply technology, you first need to know what it is that you do. And there's too many silos in real estate. So I think step one is to just understand what you do, which is your own business, which has nothing to do with learning with what technology can do. And then, yes, I think it's really important to understand that very important difference between software and machine learning. And what stage does your company actually belong in?
Thank you very much. And Benjamin, I'm going to come on to you for that, on that question next, actually. I don't know whether you want to sort of go off on what Tripty said or answer the initial question. It's up to you.
No, I think I'll follow up on a point you raised, Tripty, about silos, and I think you're absolutely right. And I think the property industry and drilling down the construction part of property has effectively operated for many decades in these silos. And I think it's struggling at the moment to face up to the challenges that truly digital smart buildings, that sort of vision that we have of delivering those. I think there are still too many sort of territorial silos, people not really buying into and offering standardized data, open protocols, willing to talk to each other across commercial boundaries to really make the vision a reality. I think you're absolutely right, and this is one of the struggles that we're facing at the moment in trying to ensure that we do deliver truly smart buildings in the next round is to try and break down those barriers and silos to try and ensure, and I think it has to be kind of led from the front, and maybe even led by government as well, and I think they're missing in this conversation. Breaking down those barriers so that actually we can deliver a smart industry, whether it's, well, I think many other sectors are way ahead of construction and property, but we need to break down those barriers, and in many respects, we have to look outside of the traditional construction industry for some of the solutions.
I want to come back to that government point in a minute. I think it's really important. And Kieran, I'm also going to come back to you on this current point. But before I do that, Dan, it seems like a good time to bring you into it off the back of what Tripty and Benjamin have said. I mean, how have you found it in terms of, coming into the real estate sector, and are you noticing all of this sort of the challenges with it being quite siloed yourself?
Yeah, definitely. I think the first place to start really is the data collection. And quite interestingly, you say, do you need to understand how the AI works? But I think some of the AI algorithms we've looked at, especially when you look at AWS and what they can offer on their platform, is actually a lot of developers, software developers, look at that and say, actually, people will understand how that black box has actually come to that answer. So I think a lot of it really is understanding and collecting the data, and actually we have got a lot of insight to date without even deploying AI at the moment. So I think the key really is not to worry too much about what the AI can do for you, but actually just start collecting data at this stage.
Thank you very much. And Kieran, we've had three responses on a similar subject. What are your thoughts on all of that? And
Yeah, so my angle on this, Emily, is slightly different. I think it's really important for the real estate industry to be much more concerned about the potential of AI rather than the workings of it. And when I say potential, I suppose I want to say that for two main reasons. I think everyone involved in real estate, particularly developers, we're the providers of the built environment. It's 100% down to us. The government, the public sector don't really build buildings. And I think in that respect, some understanding about what the future holds in a reasonably realistic sense is really important. Again, to echo some of the points Andrew made, not thinking necessarily 30 or 50 or 100 years in the future and where we will be then, but what's going to happen in the next 5, 10 years, 20 years, thinking about the life cycle of your new building in the short to medium term, the typical length of a tenancy, with one eye, but then with another eye maybe to the longer term future, especially if you're building a brand new building for the next century potentially. So I think that's the first point, and without having some understanding as to what the potential might be, it's difficult for the real estate industry to continue this approach about being the fundamental providers of the built environment and I suppose innovating in that respect. I think the second point is one of sort of PR really. So there's a huge vacuum, I think, at the moment for someone to sort of step into the AI space as a real estate provider or real estate developer. Again, lots of conversations about what it is and what it might mean and how it might manifest architecturally, but is there any particularly large house builder or major commercial developer wanting to step into that space and articulate a clear vision about what AI might look like for major new HQ international office buildings, mixed-use developments with co-living and co-working? Who is stepping into that space or wanting to occupy that space? And how can that be used as a catalyst to brief the industry more broadly, but also to help with innovation as well?
Well, let's talk about that for a minute, because that's an interesting point. I will come back to the government point, but when we talk about someone sort of stepping into the breach, it sounds very exciting, but I wonder how realistic that is at the moment, and who has the capabilities to do that and to do it well. And actually, I'll come back to you, Benjamin, on that if that's okay, and then I'll work my way back down the panel. I just wonder whether you've had any thoughts.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think the first realisation is that we're not experts in this field, and it's a very new field for the majority of us, I presume, in the room. And it's ever evolving, and it's evolving as faster than anything has ever evolved previously. And so I think the first thing is to say, look, we need some expert help. And first of all, who are the experts? And they probably come from outside of our traditional fields of where we feel comfortable. And so we've decided that rather than just jumping in, spending a load of money on new technology and apps and everything, we thought the best thing to do would actually be to, I think, as Andrew raised in one of your slides, actually to stop, pause and think very carefully about what it is we really wanted to achieve. Well, first of all, learning about exactly what digital and smart really means, and AI, but then understanding really what it is that we would like out of it for our customers, the future of our business, and our developments, and then bringing in experts to lead us and handhold us effectively through that process. We don't even know who to speak to out there in an industry that we know nothing about, to go and actually advise us and maybe to provide services, to provide software, whether it's new, bespoke, or off the shelf, to actually take us through this process so that we can actually really transform the business and the building, the buildings that we develop into truly smart buildings. So I think that's the first step, and then to find the right people to help us to advise. And so we've started that process, and with advisors, and we'll develop a strategy and then take it from there.
Thank you very much. Tripty, your thoughts on that?
I think organizations need to be comfortable to fail. And unless you can do that, anyways, it doesn't matter what you do. So the first thing is understanding what you actually need to achieve. So if what you're really trying to achieve is just future-proofing, that's not really enough, because you don't really know what you're future-proofing if you don't know what the future is. But if you're thinking about your own organization...
Sounds like the introduction to Terminator.
But if you are thinking about your organization from a perspective of, this is what I want to achieve, then you can work backwards towards it based on either the technology you have now and then where it needs to go to. I think finding the right people is really important. And they will come from a variety of backgrounds. You won't find it only in real estate, and you also won't expect a technology team to come and explain that to you. There has to be collaboration. And for that collaboration, you can't have silos. You can't work in a hierarchical organization and expect people to just come up with solutions. You have to be able to throw things at each other which make absolutely no sense, try it out, completely fail, and say, well, from that failure we learned this, so we're going to do this next. I'll give examples from what we've seen. For example, we've had clients where they say, we have all this data, we're this massive real estate player, you should really want to work with us. And the first question is, where's your data? And they say, it's in the system. Show it to me. It's structured like this. Well, there's a problem. It's structured. I can't use it for artificial intelligence. We can't use it for machine learning. If you've already got everything in drop-downs, you don't have data. And people usually assume that doing that actually got them closer to automation, but it didn't, because you're looking at from a perspective of today, what you can do in software versus what you can do tomorrow from a machine learning perspective. Now, if that same company was engaging with a group of people constantly, if you're talking to data scientists, at the same time you're talking to artists, at the same time you're talking to planners, you need to even be talking to people in healthcare. I mean, you actually need a very diverse group of people, almost in a philosophical way, discussing your problems, and then looking at it from a perspective of what do I now need to do, then it works. I think the other thing is leadership. If your CEO isn't interested, it's never going to happen, irrespective. You can keep hiring innovation directors, but at the end of the day, if the main leadership does not understand what's the potential for the future or what can happen, without that vision, that company won't go anywhere either. And that's the 3%. That's that initial 3% of the innovators that you talked about. By the time you get to the laggards anyways, that would be all tech, so it doesn't matter. It's only that initial 3% that actually matter.
Thank you very much. I'm quite interested, Dan. When you're approaching the real estate sector and you're dealing with the real estate sector, what percentage do you think that you're dealing with? Who are you dealing with when you're actually approaching them about what you deliver? How far down that chain do you think you are?
That's really interesting. Yeah, so I think with our first projects, we sort of come in with a portfolio director. It was really just to trial technology, and just our clients always tend to be, over time, early adopters. And interesting enough, they will instruct us, but pretty quickly, our first point of contact is the the building manager. And actually, our software was just born out of us being on site and listening to the pain points of this building manager who's taking phone calls day in, day out about changing set points on a BMS. So we thought we can easily raise that and put that into an app. So quite interestingly, later on in that life design of been working with these particular clients, we've found that now we're working with innovation directors, and actually focus has moved. But that's really good, because I think like the buy-in from the CEO, once you have that, an appetite to actually collect data and get it into a fashion where we could deploy machine learning and hopefully achieve AI later down the line, it becomes a lot easier. So in the early days, we were having to feedback what we think we could do potentially and then get buy-in from the senior management team. But now there seems to be an agenda. And I think that actually maybe it's not a company that needs to come in and take the AI in the market, but maybe an association. I think that at the moment with our data sets, we're collecting an awful lot of data around how these buildings are running, but what we need is even more data around the exceptions. To say particular equipment fails all the time, well, we need these companies to share the data so we can train our models to be able to find these exceptions a lot easier. At the moment, we don't have enough data to train. So it's still starting that journey. I definitely think an association would be great. And don't be so afraid to share data. There's a lot of data you can share that's completely safe and your competitors won't get an advantage from it.
You see, the real estate industry doesn't want to share its data. What?
It has none to share.
There you go. I think that the conversation is interesting. It's sort of talking about, escalating to a point where you've got buy-in from a senior level, and that's a nice segue to go back to this government point, I think, because you mentioned CEOs and we mentioned associations, but Benjamin, as you pointed out, where is government in all of this, and how much of a role do you think it could play? I mean, I appreciate it's been quite busy recently, our government, but hopefully as things calm down, and also arguably, despite what's going on in the rest of the world, this is pretty important stuff. I mean, it is the future. So there's this question in there somewhere, I think.
Definitely. Well, as far as my experience goes, I cannot see them really being active in across the sectors at all. I think it's high time. It's considering the potential for digital across sectors in the future and the disruption already experienced. I think there definitely needs to be active input and investment and leadership, especially on the smart cities point. I think, Andrew, you're very right that we're a long way off smart cities, but the potential benefit to cities, to UK GDP for starters, if there was more of a cross, even between local authorities, that would be nice. From one side of the road to the other would be helpful, let alone with a city metropolis and then between cities. I just think it's infrastructure investment, not only in transport and rail and everything, but actually to make cities truly smart and digital does need across many different boundaries that data and the digital world does not recognise. There are no boundaries effectively. Data can be gathered from absolutely every different type of source. Your statistic of 2020, there are 50 billion components that are effectively connected by the Internet of Things. Surely there's a role for government there. I mean, I know there's an initiative just started recently, I think last month, in the property sector at least, to standardise data so that when we go forward and develop BIM models and buildings, the actual data itself is standardised from sort of lift software technology to access control to BMSs, so that actually there's a naming convention that we can all buy into. I mean, it's not going to take any commercial advantage away from anybody. It would benefit everybody. And we could start to implement much better, sensible systems in each of our buildings to make them not only more efficient, more sustainable, but then the potential for doing all sorts of operations with them is unlimited. So I just can't see them present at the moment.
Kieran, can I come on to you on that point, the government point?
Yeah, no, I think Emily, government have done two things principally, and one sort of sits at the very top of the paradigm, the other at the very bottom. I think at the top is the conversation about the political rhetoric, so AI, innovation, we want to attract the best and the brightest, all of that is fantastic. And yes, the government have been very busy recently, but there was an announcement I think just made yesterday or the day before about changes to visa applications and things to facilitate more introduction and immigration into the country to support that kind of thinking and innovation, which is fantastic. I think what the government have realised though, and this is the thing we deal with I suppose a bit more at the bottom end, is the challenges faced by the data. So where they seem to be investing is at the bottom of the process in understanding the weaknesses associated with different forms of data, how everybody seems to be dancing to a different tune when it comes to data collection and resourcing, how one piece of data perhaps might not speak to another one effectively, how government departments are operating in silos, back to the sort of silos point, and not communicating well enough. So government are investing in trying to solve the data problem. I think a really good example for us is how that's crystallised recently is what the GLA are doing with the new planning data standard. So that's about trying to engineer the planning system, certainly strategically in London, to get everybody speaking the same data language when it comes to planning applications and making sure all of that data is harvested for utilisation. That needs a significant uptick in my view. It needs to be rolled out more nationally, but that's a separate conversation, and bringing in government and wider departments and also regional towns and cities too.
Thank you very much. I'm conscious of time, and I think that each of the topics that we're touching on could go on for much longer than we have time to sort of delve into them, which I think is a good sign. But just to make sure we cover everything that we wanted to today, I wanted to move on now to talk about aspirations versus what can actually be delivered. And I think we have touched on this a bit throughout the panel in terms of what's realistic and what needs to be done first. But Tripty, I sort of wanted to put that to you really. We've spoken in the past about problems around the lack of platforms available for real estate companies, and I'm just interested to see what your thoughts are on that. We have all these aspirations. I think that an industry like real estate naturally is very aspirational, but what's realistic at this stage?
What's realistic, I think, is the pressures will only come from competition, which means I see there are a few companies which are taking the lead. We're seeing that. We're seeing there are certain, mostly American companies who are taking the lead on investing the time and effort to see what the new version of real estate companies should look like. And that is all. The way they're looking at their own businesses is not the way they've always looked at it traditionally. The whole point of using machine learning is that you can actually go beyond the functions which are traditional to you, right? So, for example, in what we do, if you say it's a property manager, that's okay. That sounds cute. It's why does that have any impact? Because management fees may be something, but it doesn't really impact my building as much. But what happens is your property manager theoretically is your operating system. He's the person who's checking whether your tenant fits the specific lease. He's the person who figures out whether there's cleaning services that need to be provided. He goes and finds that person and gives the lead to them. He'll then see who's the person you need to hire in order to get maintenance done on time. So if you look at it, then it starts becoming an ecosystem, as opposed to it being just a singular point of all I'm trying to do is get a work order in and out of the system. And so what is possible? All of that is possible. Is it possible today? Absolutely not. And I think that's the thing that's really important to explain to people, that you're investing in your future. So, for example, when we have Adam live today on portfolios in the US, and he cannot manage a property today. And if anybody said, where is your AI property manager? I'd say he doesn't exist, because there is time and effort that needs to go in to building that. So step one is to just understand what people are saying. Step two is to understand what action needs to be taken if that's what they're saying. And all throughout you're operating your property, right? So you still need a backup, which means if Adam doesn't understand something, it has to go to a human being who will be able to handle it, so that you still have operations that work. And all of that requires you to be able to plug between systems. And that's the biggest challenge for real estate, because we've always created these closed systems, and that's our culture. Real estate's culture is to be closed. It's to be guarded. And the reason for that is because nobody really has any competitive advantage. I mean, the reason real estate makes money is because its timing is right. It has nothing to do with the quality of the people. I used to be a developer. I'll give myself credit for being a contractor. That's because I was delivering projects. If I started taking credit for the money I make as a real estate developer, that's stupid. Because if I wasn't making money in an upcycle, that would be something I really should be wondering about. But when it comes to real estate, we should really stop giving ourselves credit for being smart or being better than the competitor. You are in the right market, you're making money because the market's going up. When the market's going down, you're all going to suffer and say, oh my God, the government needs to come and bail us out. But the market's just going down. It'll come back up. It's cyclical. So if we can just stop the whole, we need to protect ourselves because theoretically we don't have a competitive edge, open that up. And that's the same thing with the real estate software. So Cube, for example, MRI, Yardi, RealPage. You can go ahead and buy all of these. And you're stuck in it for 10 years. And if the companies were allowing easy use of data, maybe that made sense. But if it doesn't, as a client, you need to think, well, in that case, do I need to take control of my data, whatever that data may be? Even if it's pure unstructured crap, is it going to be useful? So that, in terms of a platform, I still would stay away from platform. I don't think we need a platform. We just need to be able to control our own data.
I'm actually going to see who wants to follow up on that on the panel. Anyone?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Of course, the real trick is making money when the market's going down as well. That's the that's the real trick.
Absolutely.
But I do agree with something you said, Tripty, which is this point about the real estate industry being clever or not. And I agree with you. I don't think we are in particular. I think some of the experience we've had on AI and where buildings are currently have been very much sort of tenant-led and occupier-led rather than developer-led and landlord-led. It's sort of, again, echoing one of Andrew's points, where you've got this scenario where we are still building buildings in an incredibly traditional way. Piece of stone on top of piece of stone, bit of wood onto bit of wood, and that's where we're at. Yes, modern methods of construction are coming forward, but it's taking its time. So as a consequence of that, we found that the innovation has actually been more the tenants and the occupiers of these buildings. And then the challenges landlords and developers have is understanding and trying to predict what those needs might be and trying to future-proof pretty fixed and high-risk assets to protect themselves from that downside risk in the future, whether that be a downside risk which can be predicted at all, which might manifest in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 times, never. So I think there's a point of sort of communication perhaps between the occupiers and the landlords and the developers, and who and what might be the catalyst to facilitate that communication. I think is quite interesting.
Thank you very much. Again, conscious of time, and we want to open the floor up to some questions in a minute. There are two other points that we wanted to get through, which we'll do very, very quickly. One of them comes down to the intrinsic value that comes from adopting technology, moving with the times, and the other one is around ethics and legacy issues. So, Benjamin, I think you knew I was going to come to you on this first question here, or maybe you didn't. You look surprised. When we're talking about value that comes from technology and adoption, I think I hope most people would easily concede that if we don't change, if we don't move with the times, then that is intrinsically damaging to a business. But this is real estate, and it's, and like any other sector, obviously making money is an important part of that business operating. So when people are asking, well, what is the fiscal value of implementing these technologies, whether it be AI or machine learning, what is the answer there? Because I'm struggling with it, I have to say. And when people ask that to me, my natural response is to say, well, if you don't do it, then you're in serious trouble.
Yes, I mean, there's an element of that. There's definitely a mix of trying to ascertain, track record, statistics, proof, how, does this actually deliver return on investment? But then there's the other side of it, is actually a belief that this is the right thing to do because it has enormous potential for new opportunities beyond. I think the tip of the iceberg is knowing how our buildings perform, function on an energy basis, on the statistical side, and I think adopting intelligent systems that talk to each other has already proven, I think, only in the last sort of 5 years of adoption, that there's sort of 15 to 20% savings in just operating buildings more efficiently. I think that is just the tip of the iceberg. The fact that you can start to connect up systems, buildings with services and amenities, and therefore you connect the physical to the intangible, to people. You can connect buildings to services to people through technology. That is where the sort of the future potential lies. And if we don't get it right now, we're investing in and designing and developing buildings that will, be there for 60 to 100 years, we have to build in and understand the technology that we're incorporating into those buildings. That technology we know is going to change even before the building's completed, but we have to ensure that the infrastructure has enabled that new technology to be adopted, to be incorporated, and that's a massive learning and a leap of faith. So to answer the question, there's a small element of, I suppose, empirical evidence, but a lot, I'd say, sort of 80-20. There is a leap of faith that this is the right thing to do to enable a much better, efficient, effective future.
I spoke to someone last week who said that by doing a digital twin for every single project that they're doing going forward would, they think, save them 8 to 10% on bill costs. So let's see. You were nodding along there, Dan, I have to say.
Yeah, but one of our clients is seriously considering charging an additional 10% based on now having proven these services in a building they think is attractive enough. If they set up a building, a smart building, with all these services available, they could get an additional 10% in terms of rent based on the data we've collected today.
There you go. Thank you very much. We've got one more thing to cover, which is ethics, but we're also doing a few final thoughts, and I know that we're sort of coming up to time. So are there any questions from the floor? Yes, there's one there. If you could just say your name and where you're from, that'd be really good.
Hi, Kunal Tulsiani, company's Mantra, London-based. 23% of emissions are coming from buildings. With climate change being at the top of the agenda, or increasingly so, do you think that that is going to be a driver for the real estate industry to change their ways and much quicker than we would actually naturally expect?
Who wants to take that? Because everyone's nodding. That's a good sign.
No, absolutely, it's a key driver. Absolutely. The first thing to do is to understand how our buildings perform. Exactly what it takes to build the buildings, the embodied carbon, etc. To build them efficiently, but then to operate them efficiently across their life cycle. Absolutely, it's right up there.
In use, I think, yeah. So we started developing real-time EPC certificates just to see what that performance gap is, and it's very scary. But I think legislation will change, and then you'll have to provide an ongoing in-use EPC. It won't just be at the time you've developed the building or a prediction.
Thank you very much. I think, actually, we've probably come up to time, haven't we? We've run a bit over, which I don't normally do, so apologies for that. Let me just check if there's one more question from the floor. We've probably got time. If not, I've kind of sort of maybe put people off by saying we're up to time. But anyway, it would be good, I think, just to go back down the panel for final thoughts. And Kieran, let's start with you. Just if you were going to give everybody a quick fire message to leave here today with.
So, well, it's incredibly exciting, but we've got to sort the data challenge out and do it quickly. If we don't do it quickly, all the benefits result from AI and everything which goes with it will take too long to happen.
Thank you very much. Benjamin.
I'd encourage people to go back to their organisations and question absolutely everything that we're doing in respect of what we talked about today, and the fact that we can only get to this future where there are benefits to everyone, cities, countries and people, by connecting everything up and allowing sharing of data, good data, but sharing it.
Thank you. Tripty.
I would say it would be good to kind of just think about the impact on an organization in a world of artificial intelligence and machine learning. It's inevitable. A lot of jobs are going to get automated. A lot. Including many of yours. Which, it's the truth. And the thing is, if we keep on thinking that that's not going to happen, that's just being naive. What it does mean is that jobs are going to get recalibrated, and reskilling people in your organization actually should be a priority starting now, as opposed to waiting for it to come. And I know a lot of people think of artificial intelligence as the bots will come, I'm going to fire all my people, and we're going to be a very profitable company. But what that actually means is there is an actual social impact of what machine learning is about to do in the next few years. And all of that eventually will hit your bottom lines, because if there's no market and if people don't have jobs, then no one's going to rent anything either. Especially if you're in commercial properties, who's going to require an office if the bots are managing everything? So you really do need to think about what do you do to reskill your organization and prepare them for the change that's coming, which means now, not waiting for it to be, Terminator days.
Thank you very much. And Dan?
I'd say that I would go back and look at your current developments and your new properties you're developing and ensure that they're smart enabled or have the services available to extract the data. And the key thing is that actually it's not as expensive as you think. You don't need to go and buy an IBMS. Just make sure your building's open source, and that just means just changing your employer's requirements just slightly to ensure that you get the base build systems that make data extraction simple.
Thank you very much.